a promising expedition. A group of 9 set out to conquer the remote mountains in the midst of a harsh winter. They were young, full of passion and determination. But just days later, the entire group mysteriously vanished. When the rescue team arrived at their campsite, a chilling scene unfolded. The tent was slashed open from the inside, chaotic footprints led into the forest, and the bodies were scattered in bizarre positions. What really happened on the slopes of Kholat Shakal on that fateful night? Join D.A.R.K as we uncover the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass tragedy in today's video. The incident that took place at Dyatlov Pass in the Ural Mountains of the former Soviet Union remains one of the greatest mysteries in the history of exploration. The way this tragedy unfolded is filled with countless inexplicable details, making it a subject of study and debate for decades. Despite continuous efforts to uncover the truth, the deeper the investigation goes, the more tangled the case becomes, as if every clue has been buried forever beneath the icy snow. Not only has it drawn the attention of investigators, but this event has also inspired numerous literary and cinematic works, haunting the public across generations. Leading this fateful expedition was Igor Dyatlov, a student of radio engineering at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. An amateur mountaineer, Dyatlov had a deep passion for outdoor sports. Within just a few years, he had conquered numerous icy peaks across the Soviet Union, earning a Level 2 mountaineering certificate, an achievement not easily attained. However, Dyatlov was not one to stop there. This time, he aimed to obtain the Level 3 certificate, the highest rank available to climbers at that time. In January 1959, the Skiing and Mountaineering Club of the Ural Polytechnic Institute organized a challenging expedition. A total of 10 people signed up, most of them students of the institute, while the rest were staff members. With his experience and leadership qualities, Igor Dyatlov was quickly chosen as the team leader. The planned route was set for 14 days, with the final destination being Mount Otorten, located in the North Ural Mountains. Prior to the trip, Dyatlov meticulously studied the terrain and weather conditions, ensuring that the team was as well prepared as possible. Stretching across the Soviet border, the Ural Mountains, though not as famous as the Alps or the Himalayas, were considered sacred ground for Soviet mountaineers. Mount Otorten, the target of the expedition, bears a chilling name in the indigenous Mansi language. Do not go there. For many, this name served as a foreboding warning, but for an enthusiastic young man like Dyatlov, it was a challenge that could not be ignored. At the age of 23, he and his team were ready to face any hardship in their quest to conquer the mountain. All the members of the expedition were seasoned climbers. They were not only testing their limits against the harsh journey ahead, but were also striving to earn the prestigious Level 3 certificate, an important milestone in their mountaineering careers. They carried with them all the necessary equipment, including cameras, maps, and journals, to document their journey. Yet, none of them could have foreseen that this would be the final journey of their lives. On January 23, 1959, a 10-member team led by Igor Dyatlov packed their belongings in the common room of the club. Most of them were young and strong. The youngest was only 21 years old, while the oldest was 37. On January 25th, the mountaineering team took a train to the town of Ivdel. From there, they hitched a ride on a local elder's hay truck to Serov, a village near the pass, which was considered the first official starting point of their journey. After 2 days of rest and acclimatization to the weather, the team officially began their expedition on January 27th. That night, they temporarily camped in an abandoned village. After a night's rest, one member of the team, Yuri Yudin, who had a history of heart problems, began feeling unwell and decided to turn back. At this point, the team was reduced to 9 members. Before departing, Igor Dyatlov had made an agreement with the university's mountaineering club that once the team completed their journey, he would send a telegram to inform them. Based on their initial estimates, the expedition was expected to be completed by February 12th at the latest. Even as Yudin left the team to return home, Dyatlov assured him that he would send a similar telegram and come back to visit him. According to diary entries from one of the team members, Dyatlov mentioned that if this expedition went smoothly, he would lead everyone on an entirely new route next time. These optimistic predictions led the team to underestimate the dangers of their journey. Over the next 2 days, they proceeded as planned, and everything went smoothly despite the freezing cold of the night. In the following days, the group continued their journey through the bitter cold of the Ural winter. They moved slowly under extreme weather conditions, trekking through sparse forests and treacherous slopes. On January 31st, the team reached a high ridge, above which lay a steeper mountain with thinning forests. They decided to set up camp at the base of the mountain and temporarily store any unnecessary equipment there. The next day, the 9 members continued toward their final destination. However, they still underestimated the hidden power of the mountains. One of the team's diary entries recorded, "It was an extremely exhausting day. Everyone could only move at a speed of about 1.5 kilometers per hour. As night fell, we tried to reach the forest's edge, hastily pitched our tent, and fell asleep in exhaustion." On February 1st, they departed late, likely due to fatigue from the previous day. That day, they covered less than 4 kilometers. By around 5 p.m., they chose a slope to set up camp. Around 6 or 7 p.m., the team had dinner together when an incident occurred. Shortly after, 1 or 2 members left the tent to relieve themselves outside, and at this point, the diary entries abruptly ended. On February 12th, the agreed-upon time had arrived, yet the school had still not received any telegram from the mountaineering team. However, they assumed that bad weather might have delayed the group's schedule by a few days, which was quite common in winter. Until February 16th, there was still no news from the team, prompting the families of the members to start contacting the school. By February 20th, with no updates about the mountaineers, their families became increasingly worried and urged the school to initiate a search and rescue operation. That same day, the school dispatched the club supervisor to lead an elite rescue team in search of the missing group. The following day, professional mountain rescue teams and local police also joined the search efforts. As the search area continued to expand, the number of rescuers exceeded 2,000 people. The government even deployed helicopters and reconnaissance aircraft to conduct a large-scale search of the region. Finally, on February 26th, the search and rescue team discovered the abandoned campsite on the slope of Mount Kholat Shakal, 1,097 meters above sea level, located 5 kilometers from the peak of Otorten. Upon close examination, the rescue team found that the tent had a large hole in it. The tent had partially collapsed, with some sections covered by snow, and no one was inside. However, the team's belongings and clothing remained there, and one side of the tent had been cut open with a knife. It appeared that it had been cut from the inside. Something terrible had happened there. Notably, the hole in the tent had been cut from the inside, and outside the tent, a series of footprints were clearly visible. Some prints showed boots, others only socks, and some were even barefoot in the snow. In the freezing winter conditions of the snow-covered mountains, such behavior was equivalent to suicide. The footprints extended for 500 meters before being covered by thick snow, leaving no further traces. Based on these clues, the search and rescue team determined that the group had headed toward a forest on the other side of the mountain. Thus, they shifted their search efforts to this forest. The rescue team made an initial assessment of the tracks left behind by the hikers. The footprints led to the forest on the far side of the mountain instead of going downhill. This was a common method for mountaineers to respond to an avalanche. The fact that the tent was cut open from the inside indicated a highly urgent situation at the time, as this was an emergency survival tactic in the event of an avalanche. The equipment left in the tent and the footprints of the team members supported this theory, as some members had fled without even putting on their shoes. However, there was something strange. There were no signs of an avalanche at the scene. Even the damaged tent and the team members' footprints were still preserved in the snow. If an avalanche was not the cause, then what had frightened the hikers so much? What had forced them to flee in such a hurry that they didn't even have time to put on their shoes? After gaining an overall understanding of the situation, the rescue team began searching the surrounding forest. Following the direction of the footprints, on March 2nd, they discovered the bodies of 2 male victims beneath a large cedar tree at the forest's edge. The 2 victims were Yuri Krivonishenko, 24, and Yuri Doroshenko, 22. Both were barefoot and dressed only in thin undergarments, an outfit entirely unsuitable for the wilderness, especially when outdoor temperatures were below -20 degrees Celsius. In reality, when hypothermia becomes severe, breathing and heart rate can drop to dangerous levels. Victims may lose consciousness and even die. However, before completely losing consciousness, they often exhibit unusual behavior, such as undressing for no apparent reason. In forensic science, this phenomenon is known as paradoxical undressing. Strangely, a search of the area did not reveal the missing clothing of the 2 victims. Additionally, beneath the cedar tree, there were traces of a campfire, and several broken branches indicated signs of climbing. It was highly likely that these 2 mountaineers had climbed the tree to try and locate their way back to the tent. Between March 3rd and March 5th, the rescue team successively discovered the bodies of the expedition leader, Dyatlov, 23, a female member of the group, Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22, and Rustem Slobodin, 23. The distances between their bodies were approximately 300 meters, 630 meters, and 480 meters, respectively. The 3 victims had collapsed in the snow, positioned in a way that suggested they had been attempting to return to the tent. It seemed they had identified their direction, but perished one after another along the way. The bodies of the 5 victims were quickly transported to the hospital. According to forensic experts, all 5 had died from hypothermia. Notably, none of the 5 bodies showed signs of struggle or murder. However, Rustem Slobodin's skull exhibited injuries of varying degrees on both sides. It was inferred that this might have resulted from his head striking the ground or a rock after he lost consciousness in the extreme cold. Since no traces of activity from outsiders were found at the scene, the police ruled out the possibility of homicide and concluded that all 5 victims had perished due to hypothermia. In fact, they believed that what had happened that night was as follows. For some unknown reason, possibly a minor avalanche, the mountaineering group was forced to react urgently by fleeing down the mountainside to escape the danger zone. Once the small avalanche subsided, and before a larger one could occur, they attempted to return to the tent. However, the harsh cold of the wilderness night quickly drained their strength. Their body temperatures plummeted, causing the first 2 members to collapse and freeze to death under a tree. The remaining members, in a desperate bid to survive, used the clothing of the deceased to keep warm and continued their journey back to the tent. However, by this time, the cold had become too severe, and even wearing additional clothing was no longer enough to save them. As they struggled to return, one by one, they succumbed to exhaustion and perished in the freezing night. Mountaineering always carries inherent risks and challenges, yet this is also part of its allure. Overcoming hardships to reach the summit, experiencing an indescribable sense of fulfillment that remains unchanged in the hearts of all mountaineering enthusiasts. For this reason, despite facing accidents of various kinds, people continue to push forward. This is a tragic story. The expedition originally had 9 members, but at that point, the rescue team had only recovered 5 bodies. If the remaining 4 were never found, this might have been regarded as nothing more than a horrific accident. However, it was precisely the discovery of the last 4 victims that turned the Dyatlov Pass Incident into an enduring mystery in human history. With the cause of death for the first 5 victims determined, the search and rescue operation temporarily came to a halt. The team decided to resume searching for the remaining victims once the weather warmed up. Public attention gradually shifted from investigating the accident to mourning the young lives lost. Even the families of the 4 still missing victims, by that time, had likely abandoned hope of finding them alive. Their only wish was to recover their loved ones' remains as soon as possible so that they could be laid to rest in peace. Will the remaining 4 victims ever be found? Will there be any new evidence? Or an explanation for the mysterious deaths of the 5 already discovered?